Hello and welcome back. As always, my name is Kelly, and now that we've talked about the worst list, let's talk about the best. And of course, as always, we are celebrating that 2024 is over and all of the good films that it came with. And that deserves a drink. That's actually pretty good this year. One second. I'm not holding that up the entire time, so best to just take it down in one shot and let's get to this list. As I said in the worst list, this is actually a pretty dang good year for films, and I had a hard time narrowing down my choices to just 10. In fact, this list was way longer than my worst list because I felt that everything kind of just stepped up its game. I even have far more honorable mentions than I normally would just because I think a lot of these films deserve some form of recognition. They were really good, and in a weaker year, they probably would have made my list. But with that said, let's start those honorable mentions.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. While it is easy to say that Mad Max Fury Road is by far the better film, this was still pretty damn good. It had a lot of really awesome action inside of it. Alien Romulus. A love letter to almost every single alien that came before it, and actually scary and intense. Jesus, it makes us wish that we never went through those Covenant and Prometheus spin-offs. Sonic the Hedgehog 3. This is my pick for just pure nostalgia, because this is basically an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2 in film format, and it really does work. It gave me all of the nostalgic giggles. Terrifier 3. It was an amazing year for horror, and I just loved the practical effects on display here. Like, no other horror film did practical effects as well as this one. Civil War. A movie called Civil War in 2024. Jokes aside, the film's actually really good. It would have made the list if it hadn't used the AI. But the fact that it used AI in its production just left a sour taste in my mouth. Wicked, Part 1. This was another one that was close to making my list because I really do enjoy musicals a lot. It probably would have made it if it was the whole thing and not just Part 1. We'll see what happens in a year or two when the next part comes out, but for now. And those are all my honorable mentions. With those out of the way, let's start the list proper with, of course, number 10, Abigail. I've said this before and I'll say it again. 2024 was an amazing year for horror, and it got kicked off for me when I started to notice it with Abigail. And I will admit, this is a bit of a dark horse pick. Not a lot of people have actually remembered that this came out this year. Trust me, I get it. I also forgot that certain films came out this year. See my worst list if you want that. But the premise is just so fun and self-aware without winking to the camera. A bunch of bad guys end up kidnapping a little girl who turns out to be a vampire and starts hunting them. And what makes this really great is the fact that the characters aren't stupid. They know they just jumped into an area they should not be in. They are dealing with a goddamn vampire, and they don't really know what to do. At this point, they've already tried shooting her. It did nothing. The thing's faster than them, and the only reason it hasn't come down to kill them is because it wants to play in the room. So they actually just start going through the motions. They grab stakes, they grab garlic, they grab holy water, they grab crucifixes. They just try everything and throw it at the wall. And this is what I mean by this is self-aware. It knows that these characters are basically playing into Hollywood tropes, actively makes fun of them. That garlic one especially was really funny when the Abigail just grabs it and literally sniffs it before beating the person with the bag of garlic. And it just made it so fun. Even when you're not sure who's going to live, who's going to die, how they're going to do things, it's just fun. And I'm so glad that horror was this. It was fun. It was exciting. It was scary. It was practical. Horror just was on top of its game, and I highly recommend that everyone check out Abigail. But of course, not everyone's going to want the fun. They're going to want the sophisticated. They're going to want the discussion. They're going to want number 9, Heretic. Now, calling this one a horror film might be pushing it a bit. It's more like a thriller drama, but I still think it's horror adjacent. It is essentially a 3-man show. 2 girls, 1 guy, locked in a room having a very tense discussion about faith, religion, and belief. And the fact that it can keep you entertained for 2 hours with such a small, tight premise. There's only like 3 rooms that they go in this entire movie. And you don't lose focus or investment even for a second. That is a sign of a great film right there. Now, yes, admittedly, I might have a little bit of a bias towards this one. It is dealing with Mormon missionaries. And as someone who lives in Utah and grew up as a Mormon, I might be a little biased here. But even with that bias aside, I have to admit that everyone brought their A game here, especially Hugh Grant. He pretty much brings his trademark charm to this, which makes it honestly a much scarier performance. There are times when you really want to like this guy, but then you're also terrified of him because he's not quite all there. And the discussions that he has are just sane enough that even though they come off as crazy, you kind of have a hard time denouncing what he's saying. He's a fundamentalist wacko, and that's kind of what makes Hugh Grant so engaging inside of the film. If I were to compare it to anything, it'd be Stain from My Hero Academia. He's almost right, but pretty much wrong at the same time. And that's kind of what made this so horrifying and entertaining for me. Man, after so much horror, we really need to lighten up the mood a little bit. What should we talk about? Ooh, I know! Crippling anxiety! Number 8. Pixar's Inside Out 2. I really did not want to like this one as much as I do. Mostly because I really love the first one. Of all the Pixar films, I think Inside Out 1 is one of the truly great films they've ever made. So to have a sequel to that, it kind of feels wrong. But this movie kind of just proved that Inside Out really can work as a franchise because you can just take snapshots of this person's life going through the emotional struggles. And to make this film a snapshot of Riley when she's starting to go through, I guess, puberty and the first signs of just social anxiety, it is truly fascinating, heartbreaking, and really does show all the different sides of all of her emotions. I like that anger wasn't always angry in this film, and he had to be supportive to joy. I really did like that sadness was kind of bonding with embarrassment and even anxiety inside the film, while also kind of acknowledging that they were all kind of hurting her. We can't always be joyful, we can't always be sad, and anxiety, the way it's shown inside of this, especially with the speedster-esque movements they had, this film really showed just how complex even the simplest emotions can truly be. And then we get into the Pixar standard. It looks beautiful. Everything flows. There wasn't a single bit of animation in this entire film that wasn't top tier. And while this wasn't the best animated film this year, I am so happy to be proven wrong and that this sequel and potentially other sequels in the future could actually work. Oh, but enough of this kiddie shit. Let's get back to the horror. Number 7. Late Night with the Devil. A found footage movie about a late night show from the 70s that may or may not have come across a possessed person, maybe even the devil themselves. Horror was on something good this last year, and I want to see more of it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see this one in theaters, and I hate the fact that I wasn't able to, because this deserved to be on a big screen. It makes you really feel like you're in the audience as they're just filming this when all this shit just goes down. It is just a wonderful ride from start to finish, and I'm so glad that it's here. And I'm especially glad to see Polka Dot Man headlining his own movie. Seriously, give more movies to these actors who just appear in everything. We know they can be good. Just give them more of that so they can prove their worth. If nothing else, this is just a wild ride that you aren't so easy to forget. Number 6. Dune Part 2. I can't remember if I said it in a video or not, but I have said it before that Part 1 I wasn't going to put on my best list, mostly because it was still just Part 1 and I needed to wait for it to finish. And now that it has, I can fully say that both Parts 1 and 2 together as a whole are amazing. The practical effects, the CGI, the cinematography, the acting, everything on these are just so top-notch that it's hard to find anything to really complain about without getting into nitty-gritty book details. My brother did get into those a little bit because things are way different inside this film than they were in the book. It follows the major plot points, but really shrinks the amount of time that it took them all to happen. Like, by the end of this movie, according to my brother in the book, he's supposed to have kids with 2 different families and adopts the family kids of the guy he kills at the end of the movie. Effectively, 3 families he's already supposed to be taking care of. So there are some big major differences if my brother is to be believed. But as someone who hasn't read the original Dune, I can say everything else in this movie, amazing. Action, black and white world, the feelings and the messages, the subtle implication, the politics going on, everything in Dune is just amazing. It is space fantasy at its best, and this is the bar everything has to pass to be truly great, in my opinion. But I will admit, space fantasy has not always been my bread and butter. My bread and butter has always been action with a really good tinge of romance. So this next entry should not come as a shock or surprise. Number 5. The Fall Guy. A 2-hour love letter movie dedicated to the stuntmen. The men who really get no credit whatsoever when you're talking about films. It has action, it has suspense, it has amazing stunts, and it has some heart-roaming romance sprinkled into the middle of it that genuinely is the heart and soul of the whole movie. Now, this one is very fourth wall breaky, not in the sense of, Deadpool wink to the camera, make fun of something, more in that they're making a film within the film, and the things they're discussing about while making this film are the things that they are dealing with in the plot of this movie. At one point, someone says they're having trouble coming up with the third act. So what if they had a character in the film talk about the fact they're having trouble coming up with the third act? Fourth wall breaks like this genuinely bring a smile to my face. This is pretty much what the entirety of Nicolas Cage's unbearable weight of massive talent was. And I'm so glad that we saw another film take a stab at this while genuinely just having fun. It took every opportunity to showcase every single different type of action. We've got car chases. We've got car rolls. We've got fist fights. We have gun fights. We have over-the-top chaos and giant helicopter battles. And almost all of this is done as practically as possible. They acknowledge that some parts are CG, and they even enhance some parts with some CG by just claiming that the person beating the crap out of people is drugged and high. This was just one of those productions where you can tell everybody was having so much fun. Even the cameo characters like Jason Momoa, who comes right the hell out of nowhere. He's mentioned a lot, only to have him show up at the very end of the movie to put the capstone of the joke on there. Like, you can tell even he is just having so much fun with all of this. And I think that's why this movie has become one of those films that I can just put on whenever I'm doing something else and just have it on the background. I can just collectively enjoy this movie while I'm doing anything, and it'll just bring a smile to my face. Dang it, I'm getting sappy and happy again. I need to go back to horror, especially something very grotesque with body horror. Number 4. The Substance. A film so raunchy and so over the top that my theaters didn't even carry it. I don't know for sure if that's the real reason why my theaters didn't carry this movie when it came out. It might have been the fact that one of our theaters was on remodel, but I suspect that there was some thumbing on the scale from behind the scenes because everything else that was in theaters at the time was a lot of really bad religious crap. I suspect that for some reason in October that this might have been a little bit too much for the Utah sensibilities of the area. And it was absolutely worth the VOD when I did get a chance to watch this. Because, oh my God, is this a really good movie about how nostalgia is poisonous and how it can actually ruin your life. But with a lot of really awesome body horror in it. Yeah, this is one of those films where it's very easy to talk about the obvious thing that is the body horror. The just grotesque mutilation stuff that happens inside of it. But it's really hard to focus on what the movie's about because that is honestly the better part of this movie. Again, this is basically horror mostly because of the body horror element, but the actual content of the movie is much more The Nutty Professor, but taken dead seriously. And how absolutely horrifying it would be to have a separate personality or existence take over your life for good chunks of time. All of this while also poking absolute holes at everything that goes behind the scenes of the Hollywood world. How disgusting, how much it kind of forces people into this. I am really glad that Demi Moore is getting all of the accolades for this, and I am praying for an Oscar nod because she absolutely deserves it. Though I will admit, this isn't a movie for the faint of heart. If you get squeamish about certain things, especially with, again, the body horror elements, this might be a hard sit for you. So, be warned, it's worth it, but be warned. Number 3. Deadpool and Wolverine. The best superhero project that came out this year by a wide margin. And it was glorious. We need a Deadpool so much, especially in Marvel. We need someone to tell the Emperor he does not have clothes. Okay, that might be going a little bit too far because as much as Deadpool does do that in this movie, he also kind of sucks up to Marvel in every conceivable way. But I honestly did love that Deadpool Wolverine was willing to say those things about the current state of Marvel, even turning straight to the camera and say that the multiverse shit has been bad, while also being a multiverse movie and showing how you can do it right. But that's not really what made me love this movie. What made me love this movie is that at its core, much like Spider-Man No Way Home, it's a love letter to things that came before the MCU ever existed. And sure, not all of those movies were good, but I did love the fact that it gave them acknowledgement that they weren't all bad either. Whether they be the not-so-great Fantastic Four movies, Blade, Elektra. It even gave love to that Gambit movie that we never got a chance to see. And after seeing Channing Tatum in this, I can tell you right now, I hope that they actually do keep him around. I think he'll be a very entertaining Gambit, though maybe tone down his comic book accurate costume just a little bit. It looks a little on the cosplay side, is all I'm saying. Honestly, the only thing I really have a problem with in this movie is not the movie itself, it's its Steelbook release. When this came out, they were asking $65 for it. Regular Steelbooks cost about $30. I got lucky and I got this for $40, but $65, what it was asking for at release, is goddamn robbery. Seriously, what the actual fuck? Granted, the movie's still awesome, so check it out if you haven't. Number 2. The Wild Robot. The best animated film this year by a wide margin. As much as I can praise Inside Out 2 for some of its deeply accurate representations of emotions, The Wild Robot is pretty much... The Wild Robot blows those out of the water in pure heart and emotion. I knew this movie was something special when I saw the trailer, and there was absolutely no talking throughout all of it. It just showcased the beautiful visuals and gave you an idea of what this story is about. A robot in the woods who befriends and maybe even adopts some animal friends. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see this one in theaters, but when I finally was able to VOD it and watch it at home, I can say that the trailer did not lie, but it woefully underestimated everything else that it gave you. The robot in this basically becoming a parent to this lost child and teaching them how to fly when they themselves know not how to. It is so beautiful. The robot gaining community with all these other animals that it can't understand at first, and slowly over time learns how to speak their languages. It's heartwarming, heartbreaking, and again heartwarming by the end when you realize how much of it has to come together. Everything just seems to come together beautifully and perfectly. The visuals, the story, the emotions, the performances. This is truly a masterpiece. This is heartwarming, it is beautiful, and I highly recommend it, even if you're not a fan of the art style. That was a big turnoff for one of my friends, and one of the reasons why we didn't see it in theaters. And I really wish I had pushed him and saw it there anyway. It is just that good. And I highly recommend that you guys see it as soon as possible. Oh, I'm getting so mushy. I'm so uplifted and happy. This is wrong. I need more horror. Please, number one, make me depressed again. Number one, Nosferatu. I will fully admit I didn't want this to be number one, and maybe there's a little bit of recency bias here, because this was, at the time of writing my list, the last film I pretty much saw in theaters before the new year. But you know what? If something comes in right at the end and gives you a report card full of A pluses and an A triple plus right at the end, you know what? You just gotta call it out. This movie is almost as perfect a horror adaptation as you can get. It was dark. It was gritty. The performances were amazing. The lighting and cinematography were out of this world. There were times in this movie where, even though it was full color, it genuinely felt like it was black and white because of the way it was using negative space and shadows. This film comes off as so uncomfortable, and it is genuinely shocking to have a back-to-back week when I saw Kraven the Hunter and then this the week after. Aaron Taylor Johnson went from being basically everything we've seen from him, more meh than ever, straight into one of the best period piece performances I've seen in a long time. Oh, if that's not bad enough, we've got Bill Skarsgård being on my best and my worst list here. From ruining The Crow to becoming one of the scariest vampiric monsters I've ever seen on film. And he's not scary in the way of just ripping things apart or anything. It is all 100% presence. His shadow looms over things, and you always just feel like he's right there, about to clamp onto your neck. Or in this movie, clamp onto your chest, because that's where he apparently drinks blood from. I mean, it makes sense, that's the heart, but I have a hard time believing his teeth pierced the rib cage. But if we're going to talk about any individual performance inside of this, Lily Rose Depp, oh my god, killed it. It was admittedly over the top, but it was over the top that matched the setting. You really truly feel like she's possessed half the time, not fully in control of her faculties. She'll jump from genuinely sad and crying to belligerent and angry to just roll back in her eyes, possessed, screaming, and it all feels natural. Demi Moore, I think, had the better performance overall, but if I don't see Lily Rose Depp getting an Oscar nod, at least, I don't think she should win, but she should get at least a nod. I truly believe if those don't happen, then horror is just getting snuffed at the Oscars right now. With all that said, the last thing I'll mention about Nosferatu is that it's kind of the perfect counterpoint to Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman was kind of the sexy gothic. Everything is colorful. The blood is bright red. When things happen, they happen in the clearest night you've ever seen in your life. When Gary Oldman's character literally holds the girl's head up to drink his blood out of his chest, you can kind of get the sense of the sexy gothic there. But in this film, this is the uncomfortable, unnerving gothic. There are no good things that happen in this movie. A lot of people die. When they get fed upon, it's horrifying. It's uncomfortable. It just sounds disgusting. And in my opinion, we need more gothic horror films like this. We've seen the hot topic sexy goths. Let's see what real goths look like from now on, okay? And those are my picks for the best films of 2024. Did I miss anything? Probably. One of our theaters closed down and we didn't get movies for 2 months. Put anything I missed in the comments down below. Let's get some healthy discussion going. And always, if you like what you saw, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all those things that make channel number go bigger. And that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.